Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kramer. Our guest today is Antonio. We are going to talk about leadership. Let's get into the mindset stuff. Let's talk about those blind spots. Welcome to the show, Antonio.
Hi, Alicia. Thank you ever so much for the invitation. Very kind. I am a fan of the podcast, so I do.
I love the flattery. I'll take it. My ego says, okay, sure. He might not be telling the truth, but it sounds good.
All right. Let's just let's just leave it. It is the truth, but anyway, okay, let's move on.
I tease. In any case, uh, we want to get into the mindset of a successful leader. Now, this is where you specialize. You've got a book. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Uh, for our listeners, business owners really do need to work on leadership skills. And there are going to be some people who are listening who are thinking to themselves, well, I'm just an army of one. I'm a solopreneur.
Right.
And I have to say, having been a solopreneur for many years, there's no wrong time to start working on some of these fundamental skills. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those blind spots as well. Um,
Mhm.
we also have some of our listeners who are operating as the leader of a team. And having been on that side of the fence as well, then these skills really become important. Let's dig into this a little bit. Let's talk about what are you doing in your business, a sort of a overview, so our listeners have an understanding of where you're really helping to craft incredible leaders and how that helps to drive a business in terms of growth and more success.
Yeah, okay. So that's quite a good question. Broad question. I think it's also worth mentioning that I too have been that solopreneur, that sole individual business starter. My whole family, I'm from a family of uh, business owners, small to large, and I have been fortunate enough, more by luck than judgment, I hasten to add, I've been fortunate enough to also run some very large companies. So from small to the very, very large. What do I mean when I say large? By small, I mean one person. To very large, I mean I ran for what you might call Fortune 60 companies. So I ran four Fortune 60s, so billions of revenue and thousands of employees and everything in between. So the things that I'm going to talk to you and your listeners, your audience about today are the things that are common to all of them. So I don't want anybody to think, yes, but I'm only tiny. Or anybody to think, yes, but I'm too big for that. So I'm going to cover that whole spectrum, knowing intimately, each end of that scale. Fact of the matter is that, you know, baked in when you accept a leadership position or start an organization and therefore have accepted a leadership position, even if the organogram has one name, that's your name right in the middle of the page, right? But one imagines you're trying to grow the business to be able to serve more customers and be more successful. And then, organizations grow down in a pyramid. So people come below that and that hierarchy is built up that way. So leadership, like parenthood. Are you a parent?
I sure am.
So I am, but I have four children. They're ancient now because I'm ancient myself. But the thing about when you have children baked in to that job, if you like, or role, is there are certain things that you have an obligation to do that you can't ever say, you know what, I'm just not feeling the love for feeding them today. right? You have to feed them every day. You have to change diapers every day. You have to make sure that they brush their teeth every day and wash their hands every day. And you can't kind of say, you know what, let's take a day off from being a parent. You just can't, right? So baked into parenthood is that it's an everyday gig. Okay. Baked into leadership, when you accept the role or when you start the business, baked into that position is a responsibility, right? That you can't abdicate, you can't shirk, right? It's an everyday responsibility to try and improve, to try and get better, to try and grow, to serve more clients, to delight and serve your clients, to the best of your ability. Here's the thing, though, that not many people were born with leadership stamped on their DNA. In other words, there were some people who just, that was a gift from God and they're good leaders, and others weren't so blessed, right? That's not the case. It's absolutely a learned skill, which is great because if once we accept that, and you talk about mindset a lot, once we accept that I have the potential to be a great leader. And everybody has the potential to be a great leader, and every business has the potential to be a great business. Our job, therefore, as leaders and as parents, is to maximize the potential of our children and maximize the potential of our organization and business. And that's baked in, and that's your responsibility. So, also, when you start a business, and when you accept a role in an organization, baked in is the responsibility to make yourself better, to be the best leader that you can be. Why? Because you have to then make your people better, and your people make the organization better, and they serve customers better. So if your job is to make yourself better, make your people better, therefore make the company better. If you believe that is the case, well, then it's a never-ending cycle. There will never be a day when you wake up in the morning, the sun will come over the horizon and the angels will start singing, and you think, oh, I cracked it. I am now perfect, right? So most of our clients, well, in fact, all of our clients, otherwise we wouldn't work with them, wouldn't engage with them, recognize that they're not the finished perfect article. Okay, so that's the number one thing to say. I don't care whether you're small or huge, there's work to be done. Okay. So the first mindset is it's going to be difficult, it's never ending, but it's only like parenthood, right? You'll have some good days and bad days, right? But your job, in the same way with children, what's your job as a parent? Well, really, if you think about it, your job is to prepare them for life, to future-proof your children, right? And our job as leaders is to future-proof our business, to kind of slightly uh, steal from a good friend of ours, Marshall Goldsmith, who you may or may not be aware of, who said, what got you here won't get you there, right? The point about it is, we're constantly developing. What we tend to say to our leaders is, look, management got you here, but leadership will get you there. So you have to start figuring out, how do I work on the business instead of in the business, right? And that's a long conversation. So what's holding you back then? What's standing in your way? Well, unfortunately, stuff that you're not probably aware of, right? Here's why. Nobody ever, we have a number of businesses around and, quite a number of people. And whilst ever I was the CEO of organizations with thousands of employees, nobody ever came to me. I imagine this has never happened to you either, Alicia. Nobody ever came to me and knocked on my door and said, "Hey, boss, you got a minute?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah, come in, sit down. What's on your mind?" No one's ever said, "Well, Antonio, I've been watching you for a while, the last 6 months or so, and I thought I'd like to share with you. I think you're a particularly dreadful leader. I think you're terrible in this regard. You're awful at that. You're dreadful at this. That is just too, or it's just no one's ever said those things because nobody tends to do that. Why? Because you're the chap that signs the checks, and not that anyone, don't misread this analogy, but turkeys tend to not want to vote for Thanksgiving. It's not normally good. Right? So people rarely come to you and say, here are all the problems you have. So then how do we know what those issues are? Well, we have to develop self-awareness. We have to really work hard at that skill because nobody's going to tell you. And self-awareness isn't something that just kind of comes naturally to everybody, right? In fact, most of us are pretty bad at it. Most people think they're a good driver, but we're not all good drivers, right? So we talk in the book about this whole thing about self-awareness. Okay. Just before COVID struck, we were talking about COVID before we came in there, but just before COVID struck globally, I was giving a talk to about 400 leaders from the tiniest to the biggest and right across the globe, lots of different markets and segments. So this has nothing to do with any particular channel or anybody you serve. I said, okay, by a show of hands, who here has no blind spots? And thankfully, nobody raised their arm. In other words, good self-awareness, everybody recognized that they must have some blind spots. Okay, so good start. Second question then is, I then said, okay, could everybody just take a moment and just grab a pad and a pen and just write down what your own particular blind spots are? Now, that's the challenge. We don't know what they are. So we know that we have blind spots, but we don't know what they are because nobody comes and tells us what they are, right? So the only way that we're going to be able to start to deal with, you know, addressing our blind spots is to build self-awareness and at the same time um, to take some kind of assessment, right? So there are lots of assessments out there, but you need to objectively figure out what your blind spots are because it's your blind spots that are absolutely holding you back. It's interesting that normally when we get new clients, we ask them to finish off this sentence. Okay. So we say to them, okay, just, and I'm asking your audience to do the same. So we'll say, okay, finish off this sentence. Our organization would be bigger if only, dot, 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 right? So our organization will be bigger or more successful or if only, dot, dot, dot. And we asked them to complete that. So I've been rambling for a few seconds because I want your audience to process that question. And I wonder how you might answer that. When we then ask people, okay, so what's the answer? Our organization would be bigger or more successful if only, dot, dot, dot. We hear a range of, if only, Russia hadn't invaded Ukraine, if only it wasn't an election year, if only the weather was better, if only the economy was better, if only the dollar and the yen were more, uh, better aligned, if only. Okay, so we hear a bunch of answers that look like that, which are externalizing their problems, right? Their challenges. So if only these things were better. Well, and then we say, okay, well, how is the economy any different for any of your competitors? In which of your competitors did Russia not invade Ukraine? You get the idea.
Mhm.
So there are those individuals that try to quote unquote externalize their issues. And then there are other individuals that answer the question, if I would be more successful if only I could. And then they'll say, if only I could figure out how to serve our market better, if only I could develop my people better, if only I could. In other words, they take ownership of the issues, they internalize issues. And those leaders that go, okay, I'm not perfect. I don't know where my issues are, but I am going to resolve to improve myself. The market is the market. The weather is the weather. The economy is the economy. Biden happens to be the president at this point in time. Gaza Strip, you get the idea, right? So those that say, okay, well, those things are true for everybody in my market. Therefore, I'm going to have to start to look in the mirror for the solutions to these issues instead of, quote unquote, blaming a catalog of disasters and circumstances. And, the business is this big. I want it to be this big, but the world contrives to hold me in this place. That's not the case. So another mindset is, for those leaders that say I'm too busy mopping up the floor to turn off the faucet, right? You have to own it and control the controllables. One of the models that we have is all the things that are important. It's a Venn diagram. All the things I can control. just concentrate on that middle bit, the things that are important and the things that you can control. Because the things that aren't important don't pay any attention to, and the things that you can't control don't pay any attention to. But focus like a lunatic on the things that are important and the things that you can control. And one of those things is you. Okay. Next thing. There are those leaders that think, well, I must be terribly successful because I have an MBA from Harvard and the smartest guy in the room, right? So they think, intellectual horsepower is the route to success. Well, you and I both know that, I mean, and your audience listening, how many quote unquote intelligent leaders do we know that are idiots, right? Lots of them, right? So IQ, and it was originally Coca-Cola that did the original research that basically said, look, success has got very little to do with IQ, but has an enormous amount to do with the EQ. And emotional intelligence is so critical. It's so important. And that's another mindset. And it's a belief, because the things that are holding you back, as well as your blind spots, are also self-limiting beliefs. And there are some people that have, they think they're not smart enough. They think they're not experienced enough. They think they're not intelligent enough. They think they don't have enough money, right? These self-limiting beliefs. But if you accept that you have to develop yourself and will accept that as a daily, never-ending, progressive, it's a daily responsibility like parenthood. Accept that EQ is a skill that can be developed like any other skill and focus on that like a lunatic. Accept that you've got blind spots, find out what they are and resolve to close them. Accept that you have the responsibility to develop your people, and your people will, I'll give you a great example. You must have heard of, I imagine, Richard Branson, the
Of
British
course.
billionaire. I was going to say the good-looking British billionaire. Not so much now, but he was quite rather a dash in his youth. But anyway, so I remember when I read a report. We actually got very close within days of signing a contract to be one of Branson's companies. So I know the organization fairly well, and him fairly well. No, not well, but know of him. He was talking to one of his managing directors, and I think he was the managing director of Virgin Rail, which is the railway network that he ran in the UK. And they were complaining. There had been lots of complaints about customer service and all of that kind of stuff. And Richard Branson, who owns lots and lots and lots and lots of companies, but he owns 51% of all of these companies, but he lets the management team, the leadership team, run the company. So he doesn't interfere very much. He just goes along to the board meetings and gives his opinion. And you can't argue that it was a fairly successful model. But the managing director, I think it was a Virgin Rail, that had this rather damning report from employees, and also they did engagement survey, and it didn't speak very well of the organization. And Branson said, hey, listen, we need to train all of our people. And the managing director said, but Richard, what if we train all of our people? That's going to cost a lot of money. What if we train them and they leave? And Branson said, yeah, but wouldn't it be worse if we didn't train them and they stayed? And the point being that Branson has this great mindset of, listen, we have to constantly develop our people, right? And if we start to tie together all of the things that we've talked about here, which is like baked into leadership, whether you're tiny or huge, is a responsibility to develop yourself and to develop your people, and your people will grow the business. Once we recognize that we all have some blind spots and we don't know what they are, and we have to figure them out and improve them. We'll talk about self-awareness in a second. Once you recognize that it's got nothing to do with intelligence and everything to do with emotional intelligence, right? And that's a learned skill. Once we recognize that what got me here won't get me there, and my job is to future-proof the business and future-proof myself and my people, my organization. Once you tie all of those together and you go, okay, no one's going to do it for me. if I'm constantly firefighting, but I should look in the mirror because I think that's where the arsonist lives. I need to get out of my own way and I need to figure out um, what are the self-limiting beliefs that are standing in my way, and how do I develop the grit and determination and resilience to deal with those things? Now, you either accept the, so my father, for example, he taught us all a tremendous lesson. And if all of your listeners can learn, accept rather this message, he would, every Sunday, we would go to his house for, or my mum and dad, my parents' house for lunch because we're Spanish and that's the whole cultural thing. Probably guessed by the name, not the accent perhaps, but certainly the name. And he would say, hey, he would go around the table and say, where have you failed this week? Right. And if we had said, you know what, Dad, it's been a pretty good week. I haven't failed anywhere this week. I don't think I've failed anywhere. He would sort of throw his hands in the air and go, that's a week wasted, right? Because if you haven't failed, then you haven't learned. And if you haven't learned, then you're not developing. I had a boss that said to me, the only advantage we have over yesterday is what we've learned, because otherwise it's a bit grisly this, but otherwise you're just a day closer to dead. So learning, learning from failure, failing fast, failing forward is so important. I get on airplanes every 5 minutes, and I know that when I take off from JFK and I'm going to fly to, not personally, but I'm going to Heathrow, for example, or my business in Miami, I know that the pilot takes off and then heads on a bearing of whatever to 7.5, 8 hours later, land at Heathrow. What he or she doesn't do is just take off, go on the bearing, and 7.5 hours later land and hope that they're on the runway, right? Because the chances of that are absolute zero. But what they do, and they're very relaxed about it and comfortable about it and recognize that this is part of their job, is they are constantly course correcting for the weather and traffic and all of that kind of stuff. And so we also say, look, fail forward, fail fast, fail right, and constantly course correct and make a start. And your biggest resource, when we ask leaders, what's your biggest resource? And some people say people, no. Some people say money, no. Some people say time, no. Your biggest resource is action bias, the ability to make an imperfect start and course correct along the way. You have to have that as a mindset. You know, and I know, because I have children and you have at least one, as you said, you're a parent. The two, okay, splendid.
Ooh.
How old are they?
6 and 15.
Perfect. So your 6-year-old, a couple of years ago, started to learn how to ride a bike, correct?
Mhm.
And what's the absolute best way to learn how to not fall off a bike? Is to fall off a bike, right? Because when you fall off a bike, crikey, do you learn how to not fall off a bike? So some people think, okay, well, I'll watch videos about how to not fall off a bike, or I'll read a book about how to not fall off a bike, or I'll study people not falling off a bike. The only way to know how to not fall off a bike is to get on a bike and fall off a bike, and then you learn how to not fall off a bike. So another really important mindset is success equals failure plus persistence, right? And you know that when you were that there came a point where your youngest was learning to run and you would run behind him or her holding the saddle, and you know that when you let go of the saddle they were fine until the very moment they realized that you'd let go of the saddle.
Mhm.
And as soon as they figured that out and looked behind and you weren't there, then they fell off the bike, right? And of course, they get covered in snot and blood and tears, and you give them a hug and milk and cookies, and you put them back on the bike, right? And now, these days, they have elbow pads and knee pads and helmets and all of that good stuff. But when I was young, it was just like, have at it. And you learn pretty quickly how to not fall off a bike by falling off a bike. So, what's the point? The point is that with all of our clients, with all of our leaders, we have to have them start learning these lessons. There are lessons all over the place if we take the time to learn them. Um, so give yourself permission to fail. Give your people permission to fail because if you don't give them permission to fail, then you don't give them permission to learn. And the only advantage we have over yesterday is what we've learned, right? So because if they are or yourself are afraid of failure, right? Because everything that we talk to our leaders about is comfort zone. And we know there's no growth in our comfort zone and there's no comfort in our growth zone. So we have to give ourselves and our people permission to fail. Once we do that, good things happen. When we don't do that, including ourselves, and we become fearful of reprisal or we get fearful of, bruised egos and all of that kind of stuff, then well, what does that do? Creativity. What does that do to risk taking? What does that do to stretching? And what all of that stuff is killed. So we also have to teach them bravery. Bravery is the thing that we deal with. Okay, let me wrap all of that up at how to do it. All right, that all sounds very esoteric and very theoretical, but let me give you the practicalities of doing everything that we've just talked about, if I may. What I'm going to ask your people to do is to start to journal. What journal? Yeah, with a pen and a piece of paper. Yeah, but there are laptops these days, and there are apps, and yeah, we have apps, but just get a piece of paper and get a pen and start to write stuff down. Here's what I want your people to write. And 7 days from now, you could be just as short as that, in a compressed time zone as that. I want you can be here today, and in 7 days, you could be significantly better if you just do this one day. Okay. So every day, I'd like you to start doing this, right? When we say to people, do you journal? And in fact, when somebody said to me 10, 12, 14 years ago, hey, Antonio, do you journal? And this was my CEO at the time. And I said that I didn't. And he asked me why. And the only thing I could think of was that I wasn't a 16-year-old Victorian schoolgirl. I couldn't imagine who else might journal. So I said, because I'm not a 16-year-old Victorian schoolgirl. And yeah, okay. So he laughed about that and said, go and do some research. Successful, famous people that journal, right? And you'll discover very quickly that all politicians, all all military people and entertainers, and like Steve Jobs, he journaled, client files. Uh, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, like all successful. Not every single one of them, but 99% of them all journal. Athletes, all of those people journal. And when we say, listen, we need you to start journaling, they say, well, I don't know what to write, and I don't know how long to write, and I don't know what to do, and a blank piece of paper. So listen, don't worry about any of that stuff. Just start here, right? Every day, give yourself a score for how good a leader you were that day. How well did you run the company that day? B minus, let's say. You look back on the day, you go, you know what? I was okay, but I wasn't perfect. I'll give myself a B minus. So you're okay. So you first write down B minus, good start. What then that question requires is, well, what could I have done more of or less of? What should I have done or not done? Or should I have said or not said, perhaps, to make that B minus a B plus? Well, when I told Frank that, maybe I could have been a bit kinder. Maybe I should have answered Mary a bit differently. Maybe I should have spent 5 more minutes on that thing. Maybe I could have measured twice and cut once. Maybe I could. And as soon as you start to do that, so, well, B minus, but if I did or didn't do, or tried or didn't try, or right, there's a gap between this B minus and perhaps a B plus. And you write those things down and it takes you 5 minutes, right? Like you brush your teeth every day, like every day, I imagine, Alicia, right? Every day. There's no
I
days,
do. Yes.
there's no days that you don't, right? Even on your birthday and Thanksgiving, you don't bother on a Saturday. Of course you do, every day, right? So I want you to start working on you every day. So today was a B minus day. If I'd done and said this thing or didn't say or do, it would have been a B plus. And now you have instantly started to develop self-awareness, because here's what happens. that hindsight, looking in the rear view mirror, that hindsight leads to insight. Because what happens is after only 1 week, after only 7 days, when you know that at the end of that day, you're going to have to give yourself a leadership report card, right? You're going to have to give yourself a grading. Situationally, here's what's going to happen. After only a week, when somebody asks you a question, subconsciously you'll go, future Antonio, in about 4 hours, when I'm going to be writing down, my score for the day, will thank me if I answer it this way instead of this way. And as soon as you start to do that, so hindsight, right, leads to situational insight, which then leads to foresight. So you can start to plan better, right? That self-awareness will take you about a week, but you have to write it down because your subconscious, there's so much research, talk about it in the book, where you think of something, you then have to tell all of your muscles to write it, and then your eyes see it. So it's more important to write than type, right? But I'm only asking you to do this for a week. So, and then you self-edit as you go along, and you think the words, and then you see the words, and then you repeat the words, and you learn hundreds of times faster than if you just type, right? Because you can type faster than you can write. So if your chaps that are watching, listening today, if they can just do that to start to say, well, I was here, if I'd done or said this differently or not done that or right, I could have been here. Do that for a week and be as harsh, be firm but fair, right? Don't beat yourself up because there's no point in that. But then neither are you gorgeous in every single regard, right? So Bill Clinton, his autobiography, like him or not, he was quite charismatic and leader, but he said, look, whilst ever I was the president of the United States and probably dealing with some of the trickiest issues in the world, right? If it got to my desk, because nobody else could figure it out, and it's a tricky one, right? Um, he said, well, I'm not divine and I'm not all knowing. So, not every decision is going to be the best decision. If the best I can do is 7 out of 10 and hope that my 7 good things will outweigh my 3 bad things, then I cut myself some slack. So recognize that you're not godlike in every way, not divine in every way. So you're not going to be A plus, A star every single day. So then you come to the, okay, well, then that's probably a B minus day. But forgive yourself for that instantly. But then say, what could I have done more of or less of to make it a B plus day? Do that for 7 days. And what will happen is your subconscious thinks about these things when you're having a nap, right? When you're in bed and asleep. And so you will start to, because remember, wisdom comes from evaluated experience, not time served. And what we're doing here by writing these things down, you are evaluating your experience. So if all your audience do is that for 7 days, and at the end of 7 days, if you think, do you know what, there's not much benefit to this, then I give them permission to stop, but nobody will, right? So I remember one of my boss, when the dentist said to him, hey, listen, you have to floss every day. He went, what, every day? I have to floss every day? What, all of my teeth? And the dentist said, no, just the ones you want to keep, right? It's another thing that you have to do every day. Well, this is baked into leadership. You have to do this every day because there is a responsibility to improve yourself. You have to get better, make your people better, make the company better. That was a long answer to a short question.
It was, and we burned through the entire episode with
I
that
told you we
answer.
would.
So let's make sure that
Okay.
our listeners know how they can connect with you. Drop the name of the book, and I'll make sure that there is a
Okay.
link to it also in the show notes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I hope that was interesting, at least at some level. So, look, the book is called My Daily Leadership: A Powerful Roadmap for Leadership Success. Without wanting to overly brag, it's just one of the best business books in the world. So it's rather good, I think. So it's called My Daily Leadership. If you want to get it, it's available everywhere in paper and electronic and also audiobook. I narrated it. I flew to London and narrated it. So if you want to hear more of, I'm sure you don't, but anyway, so perhaps it will help you when you're reading it to think, oh yeah, that sounds like the kind of thing that he would say. So check out the book. And then genuinely, this sounds like it's not true, but it actually is true. If anybody has any questions to ask me, just email me directly. And if you mention Alicia, it will get through all of my filters and it will get to me, I promise. And it's Antonio at mydailyleadership.com. So Antonio, that's me at mydailyleadership, all one word.com. I will answer any of your questions. Otherwise, pop along to all the W's, mydailyleadership.com. Check out our website. On there, there's loads of free materials and free stuff and business health check and all of that kind of stuff. And if you're sufficiently interested to take an assessment, to take a blood test and an MRI and an X-ray and see where your own personal roadblocks are. We don't have to help you work with them. You don't have to engage with us. We don't have to coach you or anything like that. But if you want to know where your starting point is, take an assessment, have an objective view, and you'll look at it and you'll go, well, I don't agree with that. You'll agree with the good stuff, but not the bad stuff. Take it to your wife or spouse or husband and I promise you they're going to go, this is exactly what you look like, right? So it won't look like a horoscope. You could take it to a police, one of those police sketch artists, and you could give them the assessment and they're going to draw a picture of you. Take an assessment because you're not quite as gorgeous as you think maybe you are.
This has been a very value-packed episode, tons of wisdom, and that exercise that you encouraged everybody to do, I think is absolutely fantastic. And I really do hope that everyone who is not already implementing journaling will um, give it a solid week, like you said. And for those individuals who are journaling, you dropped some really valuable insights so they can be a little bit more self-reflective and they can utilize their journaling in a more powerful way. So this has been fantastic. Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you, Alicia. I've loved it. It's been a hoot. Thank you very much. Hopefully, see you again soon.
Well, we also have to thank all of our listeners. They've
Indeed.
stuck with us. They have hopefully learned and will implement. And on that note, thank you to all of our listeners. You know we're doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.
Ta-ta.